We are here at my home in Redmond, Washington, which is also known as Merlin's Riverside Retreat. And we're here to talk about the eclipse today. Obviously, people have been talking about the eclipse. It's buzzing all over the internet, certainly all over the astrology world. Most of the astrology publications that I get have reference to the eclipse, whether they're the Mountain Astrologer, which is kind of like the Rolling Stone of the astrology world, whether it's whatever journals that I get, everyone's talking about this eclipse. And so what I would like to do is talk a little bit about why we're all talking about this eclipse. Typically there are two solar eclipses a year. So eclipses are not that rare. There are typically two, sometimes three solar eclipses in a year. And the last one that we had was 6 months ago. And the next one we'll have is in about 6 months. But why is the buzz on this one? Well, there are a few things that make eclipses in astrology more important than other moments in astrology. As we know, a solar eclipse occurs at the new moon. That's when, from Earth's point of view, the moon and the sun are lined up. A solar eclipse occurs at the new moon when the north node of the moon is close to the eclipse point. What that means is that the moon going around the Earth and the Earth going around the sun are at the same plane. So as the moon comes in front of the sun, it's neither higher nor lower in the sky. It's exactly lined up with it. And on rare occasions, the moon is at the distance from the Earth that actually makes this total eclipse. The moon is the exact same size from Earth's point of view as the sun. This in itself is a magical miracle. So eclipses are important because every new moon is important, but eclipses are like new moons on steroids. They're like new moons that are so important because everything changes. We'll come back to that in a moment. When an eclipse happens, there's a path that follows along the surface of the Earth at about 2,000 miles an hour. This path of totality is typically about 50 to 75 miles wide and can be upwards to 3,000 miles long. This eclipse begins on the west coast of Oregon and completes on the east coast of South Carolina, following roughly a 3,000 mile path of totality that lasts about 90 seconds to a couple of minutes. And that path, that point of totality, moves from the west coast to the east coast roughly at 2,000 miles an hour, which means that the east coast will get totality roughly 90 minutes after the west coast does. The important thing here to understand is that in astrology, where the eclipse is total, where the actual path of blackness, darkness, totality is important. That's where events are historically stirred up. This eclipse begins and ends in the continental United States, making it incredibly rare. And so what that means is that the United States is impacted by this eclipse. And obviously we'll see more about that or hear more about that in a moment. The second important thing about an eclipse is what's the degree in the zodiac? Where does it occur? And this eclipse occurs at 29 degrees of the sign of Leo. This is in the seasonal or tropical zodiac. Leo is the sign of the lion. Leo is Latin for lion. It's the heart center. Leo is the sign of heartfelt love. In fact, this eclipse is really at 28 degrees and then some of the sign of Leo, but it's almost at 29 degrees of Leo. This is significant not only because it's in the sign of Leo, which talks about love and love being eclipsed. love, which is what Leo is about, it's blackened, it's darkened by the moon for a moment. All of a sudden, there is no light there. The other thing of significance, though, is that at 29 degrees of Leo, actually between 29 degrees of Leo to 0 degrees of Virgo, is the fixed star Regulus. Regulus is one of the four royal stars that the Persian astrologers considered to be the four most important stars. These are Fomalhaut, Antares, Aldebaran, and Regulus. Regulus is conjunct or lined up with this eclipse. We should say it the other way around, because Regulus doesn't move from Earth's point of view. This eclipse is lined up with Regulus. The four royal stars, called the Watchers, they watch what's going on. They all denote royalty, success, fame, and fortune, except each one of these four stars has a downfall. One of them, for example, the downfall is lack of integrity. That would be Aldebaran. Antares, which is about success through balance, the downfall is obsession. With Regulus, the downfall is revenge. Being vengeful is basically the downfall of royalty under the fixed star of Regulus. This eclipse is lined up with that point. Okay, the next important thing in eclipses is if you have a planet in your birth chart within a few degrees of the eclipse point, or opposite it, or 90 degrees square it, then this eclipse will have more importance for you. Eclipses radically change the energy. They kind of have the influence of the planet Uranus, which is lightning striking, energy being released, it's explosive. The ancient prophecy with the solar eclipse is the king must die. Why is that? Because power is turned upside down, especially if and when there is an abuse of power. Now we come to this eclipse and why so many people, so many astrologers are talking about it. Okay, remember the shadow of the eclipse is on the continental United States. This eclipse is doubly important because it's lined up with one of the four royal or king stars of Persia, Regulus, that basically punishes people who are vengeful, who are full of revenge. This is the opposite. You see, Regulus is the star that's at the heart of the lion. It's Leo's heart. And the eclipse on this point basically hides that love. The next point was in review that if you have a planet that's at that point, then this eclipse is particularly important for you. And now we come to the third or the fourth and final piece in this, and that is Donald Trump was born during a full moon eclipse. He was born an hour and a half before it was total, but he was born during or just right at the time of a full moon eclipse. With the planet Uranus lined up with his sun. Uranus is the planet of that lightning shift, the suddenness, the erraticness, the genius slash mad professor, all at once. The matter of fact, the professor from Back to the Future is a good Uranian image to hold. Donald Trump was born with Mars, the god of war, the contentious planet, the angry red, in his case, maybe orange. The angry red planet is lined up when Trump was born with his ascendant, meaning that he was born with Mars rising. And his rising point in his chart, his ascendant point, is 29 degrees of Leo. So for months, astrologers have been talking about how this eclipse lined up with Regulus, the star that punishes people who are vengeful, who hide love, who maybe even spread hate, that this eclipse is doubly important for that reason, because it's at the same degree as Trump's ascendant. Now, having said all that, it really doesn't take being an astrologer to understand that we live in pretty intense times. I don't care what your individual political beliefs are. This is the United States of America. I was brought up to believe that anyone has their right to believe anything, with an exception. And that exception is hate. There is no reason, there's no excuse for hateful behavior. I don't care what affinity you have. But the point here is that we've become blown out of shape. And part of it is the eclipse energy that is so prevalent. On top of that, this eclipse is also lined up with the planet Mars, Mars being the god of war. And this eclipse is also harmonized or trine. The eclipse at 29 degrees of Leo is harmonized or trine to Uranus, which is at 29, 28 degrees of Aries. And so we're at a point of change. We are at a point on this planet, in this country, in the United States of America in particular, where we're at the edge of change. Where this is going, astrologer or not, we cannot see, we cannot know for sure. We do know that eclipses are great portents of change. We do know that things are imbalanced now. We also know that politics occurs locally. What does that mean? We can talk about war or potential war with Russia, North Korea, Venezuela. It doesn't matter. Basically, everything comes back to individuals and what's going on with us individually. And so the question becomes, what do we do individually during this time of great change? And that is more than ever, we need to hold the light of the sun in the heart of the lion, in the heart of love. We need to shine our individual love lights brighter than ever. You see, and one of the things that I didn't say is that Mercury is retrograde. Duh, it's the old when it rains, it pours. The fact of the matter is that retrograde Mercury, on top of everything else, kind of spins the energy inside out. We're ready to jump to conclusions and make statements that we wish we didn't make, and to basically get ourselves into trouble because of misunderstanding. This is a time for action. This is a time to hold the center. But that center is not about revenge, because if we know anything about astrology, we know that Regulus punishes those who are vengeful. So if we're not about revenge, we're not about getting even, we're not about hitting back, what are we about? We are about showing up in bigger numbers and stronger center than ever before, with our center of heart, of love, shining our love lights, being the higher side of Leo. Leos are sometimes considered to be boastful, dramatic, that whole sense of being on stage, of being proud. All that's true. But the deeper meaning of love is the deeper meaning of Leo is the intention of holding love regardless of what's reflected back. An eclipse darkens the light of the sun. It makes the light of the sun in the middle of the day go out. It's an awe-inspiring event to behold. More people, they say, will experience this eclipse, the totality of this eclipse, than ever any eclipse before. And I too, hopefully, will be at the totality point experiencing this. I've had the pleasure or the experience of being in another total eclipse, and it was awe-inspiring. The inspiration that we gain from this eclipse is the ability to see nature in its raw cosmic magnificence, and yet it still is incumbent upon each and every one of us to hold that center when the sun goes out in the middle of day for a couple of minutes and the stars come out in the sky. You'll be able to see Venus and Mars and Mercury, and if you have a clear view of the horizon, even Jupiter, which will have just risen. The stars will come out in the middle of the day. The stars are always there. We get to see things that were hidden. And that's what this time is about, both politically and individually. We are getting to experience things that have been there that we now have to deal with in their fullness, in the light, because the sun, as magnificent and as warming as the summer sun is, the brilliance of the flowers that come out under the light of the sun. When the sun is out, we can't see what's going on because the sun is so bright. And so for that moment, when the sky becomes dark, we get to see everything else in the sky. And as we become more aware of all these other things that we didn't see, both personally and globally, politically and economically, when we get to see these things, the question is, what do we do with what we see? Do we become angry and vengeful and hurt and annoyed at what we've missed or what's there or the people who are acting like this? Or in some way, do we find a higher road, a higher path to travel that instead of pulling us down to a deeper, darker, more shadowy level, actually does the reverse? And that takes the underworld, the shadow realm of Pluto, and it brings it up into the light. So here we are. We're in this together. There's no I and you separate. As Paul McCartney, as the Beatles sang, I am you as you are me, as we are all together. Goo goo gajoob. Here we go. And I think it's incumbent on each and every one of us to maintain a position of love and of light, regardless of what's happening out there. There have been many eclipses. Eclipses are regular. Has there ever been an eclipse that started and ended on the continental United States while the leader of the country had his Mars and ascendant at that degree, while Mercury was retrograde, while we're on the tail end of a 5-year period of rock and roll from a Uranus-Pluto square that harkens back to the changes that were occurring during the 60s? No, this is new territory. We ain't never been here before. I know the double negative. We ain't never been here before. On the other hand, everything is always about repetition. The great American poet Edna St. Vincent Millay once wrote, "Life is not one thing after another. It's the same damn thing over and over again." So yeah, on some level, we've been here before. Nothing is happening that hasn't happened before. On the other hand, we've never been at a point where social media has the impact of being able to have so many people experience something in the same moment at the same time, and we can change this on a dime. We can be in a race car going 270 miles an hour, and literally on a dime, we can stop, reverse, and change directions. And in fact, that's what we need to do. It doesn't take being an astrologer. It doesn't take being spiritually advanced. Matter of fact, you don't even have to really be very smart to realize that we meaning humans on this planet, we can't go on the way we've been going on. It's not sustainable. So have we ever been here before? No. Does that mean that we can't figure this out? No. We have to figure it out. We don't have any choice. The word emergency is something that emerges at the time of a crisis. It's an opportunity. We have an opportunity in front of us. And again, it's not about putting it out there, the Hopi prophecy that ends, and we are the ones we've been waiting for. This is not about waiting for the church, for the government, for the president, for the Pope, for our parents, for someone else to fix it. This is about us. This is about each and every one of us coming up with whatever individuality we have, whether we're Black, whether we're Mexican, whether we're white, whether we're gay, whether we're transgendered, whether it doesn't matter what meat body we are living in. We are all spirit, we are all consciousness, and it's up to us to figure out how we're going to make this together, because if we can't figure out how to make it together, we ain't going to make it. The totality and even the partiality of this is pretty much around North America, going from Canada down through Mexico, depending upon how much partiality one can observe. So the rest of the world doesn't get to see it, but again, with the magic of the internet, you can still watch it live online unfolding, and probably as good as some of the places that might be cloudy anyhow. So we all can experience it. How this impacts everyone, again, if your individual birth chart which you can calculate here on Tarot.com, if your individual birth chart has planets around 26, 27, 28, 29 degrees of Leo or fixed signs Scorpio, Taurus, and Aquarius, or even 0, 1, or 2 degrees of Virgo into the next sign, or the mutable signs Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces, then this eclipse has more importance for you. The fact of the matter is that although it's affecting and impacting the United States more than some of the other countries, the impact will be felt everywhere for 2 reasons. Number one, it is everywhere. And number 2, the importance of what happens in the United States has fallout, has ramifications, has consequences for us everywhere on the planet. I think it's important, you know that saying, think globally, act locally? I like to say, think cosmically, act locally, because it's important for us to use this window. It's a portal. I mean, eclipses are portals. They're like black holes that allow, like a wormhole, both into the past and in the future. Astrologers acknowledge that eclipses do something weird with time. Other aspects seem to impact us at the moment that they occur, whereas eclipses kind of create these time warps that can be impactful for months before, all the way to months afterwards. And in fact, this particular eclipse, I think, the energy will be pulled back toward the end of the month and then the first week or so of September, because retrograde Mercury comes back over the eclipse point and then goes direct over it again the first week of September. And at that time, the end of August, beginning of September, not only is retrograde Mercury backing up into the eclipse point, but Mars, the fiery god of war, is coming over it. And so I think that this first week of September will be very intense. And again, personally, we need to look in our lives and see what is it that we need to change about ourselves. It's not just what do we need to change about Washington, D.C., or about hate crimes, or about racism, or about genderism, or any of these things which are plaguing us because we're holding on to beliefs and understandings that go back centuries, maybe even millennia. It's not just about what do they need to do to change, it's what do I need to do. And each and every one of us has areas of our individual human lives where we contribute to what I'm going to call the mess. Whatever the messes are out there, whether they are the global cultural, political, economic dynamics, or whether they're our own messes as parents, children's, lovers, friends, employers, employees, we all have relationships, and that's really, with the eclipse in Leo, that's really what this is about. With Mars present, the temptation is to get angry. The temptation is to bring up that fire in our gut and to hit back. And yet with Regulus so present and so aligned with this eclipse, the warning is don't hit back. Don't be vengeful, because anger and revenge will precipitate more of a response than we imagine. And we might see this being played out on the national politics, at least in the United States right now, but it doesn't mean that each and every one of us individually need to play it out. On a personal level, whatever your sign is, wherever you are on the planet, the question becomes, what areas in my life need attention? What needs work? Going back to the lunar eclipse a couple of weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, going back to that lunar eclipse, what from the past doesn't serve us anymore? What do we need to separate from? What do we need to let go of? And now at this eclipse point, on August 21st, at this eclipse point, it's almost like someone's grabbed a hold of the light switch and is flipping it on and off and on and off. And it's like, it creates like this, almost like an epileptic reaction where our nervous system kind of like freaks out because everything seems to be happening at once. And because of Mercury retrograde, our tendency is to overreact. I'm not saying that we should do nothing. I am saying that we need to do something. And the something that we need to do is finding our heart center and coming from that spot rather than falling into the Regulus caveat, which is revenge will be punished. Thank you all for being here. I hope to see you all on the other side. Hope to do another Facebook Live sometime in the near future, talking about the amazing changes and how we as a human race have come together and have found a way to express love rather than hate. That's my wish. Happy Eclipse Day.